Bolivia's meltdown and the casualties of climate change.
This is Chacaltaya.
That's all that's left.
Yeah.
And China's great African takeaway, the new colonial power.
We were 50 meters from the coalface when a dynamite charge exploded.
Hello and welcome to Foreign Correspondent. I'm Mark Corcoran, about 5,500 metres up in the Andes Mountains of Bolivia. Our first story tonight centres on global warming and the looming crisis for Bolivia. These glaciers provide about half the drinking water for some 2 million people just down the mountain here. The only problem is the glaciers are now melting at an unprecedented rate and will be completely gone within 20 years.
They gather for a blessing from the mountain's traditional guardians. The Aymara Indians say to ascend this 6,000 metre peak without absolution is to incur the wrath of the gods.
Yo creo que no están enojados, digamos. Solo que están, digamos, no están, digamos, hablando, porque nos hablan. Nos hablan, digamos, de que tenemos que, digamos, convivir con la naturaleza y no haga más industria, no haga más contaminaciones. Entendemos el mundo así, digamos, de no contaminar, podemos todavía sobrevivir un tiempito más.
On the arid western side of the Andes mountain range, snow and ice mean water, and water is life. Now this icy realm is melting before their very eyes.
Que ainda se dais para mí ante Dios nuestro Señor. Qué grande es el sol que nos acompañó en una parte de la subida. Y qué altura. ¿No? ¿Saben yo cómo hemos subido? ¡Oh, Dios! ¡Qué grande eres tú!
¡Oh, Dios! Del Espíritu Santo. Amén.
But their prayers remain unanswered. The Aymara call this place Chacaltaya, meaning cold road. In modern times, Bolivians proudly boasted that this glacier, at nearly 5,500 metres, was the world's highest ski run. But no longer. These days, it looks more like a resort on the moon. Glaciologist Dr. Edson Ramirez guides us towards a sad sliver of ice.
So, this is it.
This is Chacaltaya.
That's all that's left.
Absolutely.
Yeah? How many years before this is gone?
I think that's only 1 to 2 years.
So Edson, this is the old ski lodge.
Yes.
All right, you've got a lot of old pictures here.
Inside the lodge, memories of bygone days, when Chacaltaya was a playground for Bolivia's wealthy.
We can see the Chacaltaya Glacier in 1914.
The ice used to go right down to the
Yes.
road down the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the road.
So when did people stop skiing here?
I think it's in 1998, and we are here.
Now should be the peak skiing season. Yet, there are only rocks. At this altitude, there's only half the oxygen of sea level. For the unacclimatised, it's hard enough just breathing, let alone attempting a downhill run. But it's all in a day's work for Edson Ramirez. Bolivia is losing more than just its only ski field. Small, high-altitude glaciers act as water reservoirs for millions of people who live in arid regions of the Andes.
How many other glaciers are melting like this?
I think that it's around 80% of the glaciers on the Cordillera Real, because the Chacaltaya is representative of this kind of glaciers.
Edson Ramirez and a team of French scientists have been documenting Chacaltaya's decline for 15 years. At first, their observations were treated with scepticism. Now, their glacier has become a cause célèbre of the international global warming debate.
You can observe this kind of melting since the 80s. It's a dramatic melt of this kind of glaciers, the small glaciers.
In 1998, when this ski lift finally shut down, Chacaltaya was still 15 metres thick and losing 1 metre a year. That rate has since accelerated dramatically.
As you can see, we have only 3-4 meters.
How old is the ice we can see underneath here?
I think that maybe it's around 18,000.
18,000 years.
Maybe, yes.
How many years before all the glaciers around La Paz are gone?
It's around 20 years.
20 years?
20 years.
And they'll all be gone?
Yes.
For 2 million people living under the mountains in the cities of La Paz and El Alto, that means losing up to 60% of their water, which comes from glaciers. It's a huge dilemma for the entire Andes region, potentially affecting tens of millions of people.
It's a critical problem. It's the same problem for Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia, all the Andes.
So we're talking about the drinking water for millions of people just going.
Yeah.
In downtown La Paz, there's no sense of a looming crisis. Nor is there any evidence of water restrictions. With 5 governments in just 5 years, crisis management is the norm, dealing with today's problems without worrying about next year. But in La Paz's twin city, the vast slums of El Alto, it's a very different matter. This is home for more than 1 million mainly indigenous people. As changing weather patterns cause crops to fail on the Andes high plain, they've been drawn to the city in search of work. The population is set to double in the next decade. Water, or lack of it, has always been an issue here.
No hay de dónde sacar agua. Traen del río de allá, que es Achocalla, y esa agua es sucia. Entonces ellos traen para vender eso acá, a la comunidad, al sector donde nosotros vivimos.
For Berna Cabrera, life is a daily struggle to provide for her family. After 7 years and at great expense, She finally saved enough to have a tap installed in her home. It often runs dry.
Cuando hacemos reuniones comunales, hablamos justamente del agua. Uno, que no tenemos alcantarillado porque no tenemos agua. ¿Para qué? Dice el alcalde mismo, dice, ¿para qué vamos a hacer alcantarillado si no tenemos agua?
A single mother, Buena Cabrera works as a nanny down in La Paz to support 3 generations of her family.
Abajo mucho trancadera y todo.
She considers herself fortunate in having a job. Still, family discussion often centres on where they will get that basic necessity needed to sustain life.
Y cuando llueve, para nosotros es alegría porque chorrea de la calamina, ¿no? Entonces recibimos enturriles y ponemos lavandina y con eso los niños se lavan, comemos y todo.
Pero va a echar hasta aquí.
Like most Bolivians, Buena Cabrera never expected much help from government. She attends a typical community meeting. They're worried that there's just one tap for 200 people and their livestock. Water is already expensive, and with the glaciers melting, everyone is acutely aware that the price will rise even further. Some fear water will soon cost more than soft drink.
Por falta de agua, Coca-Cola, lavarnos y tomar. Mire, vacían las botellas, rápido, violento. ¿Necesitamos más Coca-Cola, no, señora? Sí. ¿Qué vamos a hacer? ¿Ya? ¿Eso no haces? No hay agua.
Ningún gobierno se ha preocupado por nosotros en realidad. Nadie se ha preocupado por el agua. Nadie tampoco nos ha venido a preguntar qué tipo de sobrevivencia tenemos sobre el agua. Nadie, absolutamente nadie.
But a few people do worry. High above the city, Dr. Ramirez studies satellite imagery, plotting the glacier's decline and the looming water crisis.
Yeah, it's La Paz, El Alto.
Yeah. And when is the, if you like, the demand going to exceed the supply?
That's a very big problem because it's in 2009.
So in 2 years' time,
Yes,
you'll
yes.
start having a problem.
Yes,
And from then it'll just get worse.
yes.
Andes glaciers have all been in slow decline since a mini ice age here about 300 years ago. So what's causing the accelerated meltdown? Edson Ramirez says man-made carbon emissions are a factor. The question is, to what extent?
Que si bien hasta el momento no hemos podido, no se puede todavía cuantificar cuál es la proporción que el ser humano provoca sobre el cambio climático, pero sí sabemos de que estos efectos que provoca el hombre aceleran o juegan un rol de catalizador de estos ciclos.
He says the glaciers have been hit hardest by an unprecedented number of El Niños, the complex weather cycle triggered by warming and cooling of water at opposite ends of the Pacific Ocean.
Lo que hace que la masa caliente que está en el sector de Australia se desplace hacia la costa del Pacífico del sector peruano. Este efecto hace de que en la cordillera de los Andes y principalmente en Bolivia esté caracterizada por tener baja nubosidad, consecuentemente se tiene baja precipitación y alta radiación, lo que hace de que el glaciar, como vemos acá, pierda su característica de reflexión de la radiación.
Low rainfall means less snow, and it's snow which both replenishes the glacier and protects the ice from the harsh sun at such high altitude. Without the glaciers, scientists worry that the Andes highlands will have to depend on just 400 millimetres of rain a year. Then there's the problem of electricity. Sitting atop the spine of the Andes, this hydroelectric dam generates 80% of La Paz's power. It relies mainly on glacier runoff to drive the turbines. No water, no electricity.
The system of water provision for El Alto might collapse in the next 2 or 3 years.
Javier Gonzalez is a government climate change planner. He says Bolivia, the poorest country in South America, can't afford to build massive rain catchment dams. The task in this earthquake-prone zone is too complex and expensive.
The national greenhouse gas emissions is about 0.03% of the global emissions. But we have to bear the consequences of global warming.
Bolivia, he says, will pay a heavy price for a problem created by the industrialized world.
I'm very, very pessimistic of the situation at the international level. We know very well that the solution is through the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but not every country is committed to do this. The problem is being produced by industry nations, and we are facing the problems. We are facing the consequences of that.
Doesn't seem fair.
It's not fair at all.
Barely an hour's drive away from the parched streets of El Alto, the Aymaras celebrate the life-giving power of water. It's a festival marking the end of autumn and the harvesting of their crops. They live on the shores of Titicaca. This 8,300 square kilometre expanse is one of the world's great freshwater lakes. Recording the ceremony is Victor Hugo Ordóñez.
Obviamente el cambio climático está afectando bastante en la reducción de los glaciares y la falta de agua. Entonces, yo creo que hay una crisis y esa crisis no se está resolviendo hasta la fecha.
A member of Bolivia's now defunct Olympic ski team, he runs an eco-tourism company. More than 25 rivers feed from glaciers into the lake, which has just reached its annual high water mark. Victor Ordóñez worries that as the glaciers melt, the lake level will drop, and Titicaca's fragile environment will collapse, along with the livelihoods of these communities.
Para el lago Titicaca y para los propios ecosistemas que van hacia zonas de los valles, hay un gran problema. Para el lago Titicaca, siendo uno de los principales beneficiarios de agua hacia estas regiones.
Despite these concerns, one short-term fix being mooted is to draw drinking water from the lake. But Edson Ramirez says this would create even more problems.
Why can't you just pump water from Titicaca down to...
Because the quality of this water is not so good for human consumption.
Yeah. Why? The salt?
Salinity and mines.
Oh, contamination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bolivia has a centuries-long tradition of mining. It's a lucrative but deadly business for workers. Find an old mine head, and invariably not far away will be a lonely cemetery.
Now, as if the Bolivian government didn't have enough to worry about, there's another potential problem. The runoff from nearby glaciers come down into this dam here behind me, which forms part of the La Paz water supply. In fact, it provides some of the drinking water for the city. The only problem is they built the dam right next to this abandoned mine, which no one wants to take responsibility for. Contaminants have been flowing into this water supply for quite a while. The authorities say they've been able to deal with this problem. They filter them out downstream. The big fear now is that as the runoff from the glaciers decrease in the coming years, the concentration levels of contaminants are going to increase, and they won't be able to handle that problem. Why can't you simply have the mine demolished and have the site decontaminated?
It's difficult to deal with the sector, with the mining sector in Bolivia. The mining sector is a very strong sector in Bolivia, and environment is not as important yet.
No one is laughing in El Alto. For these people, global warming is more than just an abstract political debate. World leaders can argue about the cause and establish a complex system of carbon emissions trading. But Bolivians face the very real risk of becoming casualties of climate change.
Si yo trabajo, es gracias a Dios porque tengo un poco de dinero, pero hay gente que no tiene dinero. Es gente pobre, gente muy pobre, que no tiene a veces ni siquiera, como le digo, ni comprar una jarra de agua. A tal extremo llegamos de pobreza que...
We can change this phenomenon.
It's too late.
It's too late.
They're gone.
They're gone.
All of them.
All of the glaciers. It's very sad.
Up on the mountain, the Aymara priest offers up the fetus of a llama to the cleansing flame, sacrificed to the earth goddess Pachamama. Now he and the people of the Andes wait for their prayers to be answered.
Hello, I'm Stephen McDonnell in Beijing. Next tonight, China's exploitation of Africa. To fuel its rapidly growing economy, China needs oil, minerals and other raw materials. Trade between China and Africa has more than quadrupled since 2000, and hundreds of Chinese companies have been set up for this purpose, many partly owned by the Chinese government. Doing deals with some of the most corrupt and undemocratic African regimes is just part of the cost of doing business. One of Africa's most experienced reporters, Aidan Hartley, reports from Zambia and Congo.
China first sent aid to Zambia in the 1960s, when Beijing propped up socialist regimes across Africa. Now the Chinese are back. We've heard that China is now giving Zambia military aid, and to give you an idea of the extent of Chinese influence in the continent now, behind us is the main government building, also constructed by the Chinese. Everywhere we saw signs that the Chinese are pouring into this former British colony. 200 companies have invested, many of them working directly for the Beijing government. The Chinese are this mine's new owners. Using technology not seen in the West for 40 years, they're making money and providing jobs. After decades of misrule, 2/3 of Zambians live on less than 50 pence a day. But investors like this Chinese company are now helping to unlock the vast potential of Zambia's mineral wealth. We're getting down to the bottom of the shaft. We can hear running water and also the sound of machinery. What's your step now? say that the struts don't look terribly strong to me, holding up the roof. This is not a place for the claustrophobic. It's hot. We're way underground. We were 50 meters from the coalface when a dynamite charge exploded. That was quite a big blast. You can feel the shockwave coming down the tunnel. And the tunnel's filled with smoke and coal dust. A few years ago, these mines were derelict because the state couldn't run them at a profit. The Chinese have come in here with a minimum of investment in simple machinery and their skills, and they're helping Africa to become profitable.
The Chinese people came and asked the government to take over. They said, okay, they are to allow him to take over.
Do you think that the private mines run by the Chinese are more successful?
They are too much successful, yes.
China brings business to Africa in return for the metals it needs to grow. But the way it operates is often at a terrible cost to ordinary people. We headed for Congo, one of the world's richest nations in terms of mineral reserves. At the frontier, we saw hundreds of trucks. People told us the Chinese were exporting huge quantities of copper and cobalt out of Lubumbashi, capital of Congo's Katanga province. Okay. So this man is carrying copper ore for a Chinese company. He's picked it up in Lubumbashi and he's now in Zambia and he's taking it to Ndola where it will be refined. The ultimate destination for most of the ore is China, where the copper will be used to build new cities. The cobalt will end up in mobile phone batteries. We followed the empty trucks as they returned to Congo. Next day in Lubumbashi, we went looking for the mines. At this open-cast pit, hordes of hungry people scratch in the dirt for a living, creating an apocalyptic scene. Sort of landscape of a First World War battlefield with sandbags and all sorts of earthworks everywhere. In fact, there are 5,000 to 10,000 people working here every day. Congo recently held elections, but after decades of misrule and civil war, it remains in chaos. Huge fortunes are being made by foreign companies, but the average income here is £60 a year, and life expectancy is less than 45 years. He's saying that he earns 5 or 10 or 15 pounds a day, depending on the amount of material that he can sell. And he sells it to a middleman called a negociant, who then sells it on to the Chinese and other businessmen. Many miners said they earned barely enough to eat, though the price of copper has reached historic levels. They're saying that the Chinese pay low prices, that they lie to them about the purity of the ore that they sell them. The Chinese were driving this back-breaking work, but were conspicuous by their absence. We went to find them. We were told that the mineral wealth in Katanga was traded in the boomtown of Lubumbashi. The Chinese are the latest arrivals to seek their fortunes here, but they were just as elusive in the city as in the mines themselves. On the street, we asked some money changers where we could find the Chinese, since we knew they were going through truckloads of cash. This man says that the Chinese don't like to come here and do business openly in town. They wait in the outlying areas for the money changers to take the money to them. And he says that they give them a very bad rate, that the Chinese are happier to stay in their secret locations and get a bad rate than come here and do business openly. We headed into the countryside, hoping to find the Chinese brokers. We arrived in the village of Luisha, where the copper ore sits just below the surface. The natural wealth of this place hardly benefits the local people, who are among the poorest I'd seen anywhere in Africa. We found the Chinese traders in the back streets buying copper and cobalt ore.
Hello.
They were shocked to see us and refused to talk point blank. Villagers told us a factory was being built nearby, which has imported dozens of Chinese workers.
Yeah. The Chinese here have refused to talk to us. They run most of the factory here. Hello. How are you?
No, English, no.
Okay. No. No. No.
This is a secret. Secret. This is secret. No, we have not open. We have authorization.
We don't know what this guy's problem is. He keeps saying that it's secret, which I think just communicates the attitude of the Chinese here.
A policeman angrily intervened against the Chinese, whom I could see now are loathed by the local Congolese. From what I'd witnessed, the Chinese were secretive and paranoid. We travelled into the jungle, still searching for brokers. Wherever we went, we saw large numbers of Congolese opening up the hillsides.
We're going to the place where they do all the mining outside Kombuvu, and we've heard that there are a lot of kids here. Wow, look at that.
I wondered how old the workers were.
Huh? He claims to be 17 and he claims to be 19, which is obviously nonsense.
I wanted to see for myself where the children were being forced to work, so I followed them. These weren't proper mines, but hand-dug tunnels going deep into the ground.
It's so narrow that it's almost impossible to get down, and these things cave in on a regular basis.
Because the tunnel was so narrow, children were being sent in to haul sacks of rocks. Inside it was dark, hot, and the air was foul. At the end it opened out into a chamber where the bright green copper ore could be hacked out. These kids were risking their lives for a pittance.
With some relief, I'm getting out of this hole and back into the daylight. Bole, Goja. Yeah. Young Kelly says that he'll take this, he'll sell it to the negociants, who are the middlemen, and the middlemen then sell it to the Chinese. But the negociants are saying that the Chinese pay very badly. They make huge profits, but the money they give to the Congolese is very, very small.
The miners told us that only the day before a man had died nearby when a shaft like the one we had crawled down collapsed. Many of the miners I had seen were children. Tragically, the extraction of copper and cobalt depends heavily on the exploitation of child labour on a vast scale. All this for electrical cables and phone batteries. In the nearby town, we finally found a low-level Chinese broker willing to talk.
卖不出去啊！现在把挖出铜来卖给我们中国人，他们就有钱了。
He admits that the Chinese are buying from children, and he says that it puts money in their pockets, that without the market of copper for the Chinese, that these children would be starving and they wouldn't be able to buy things.
This Chinese broker told us that back home he had grown up in poverty himself. No wonder he didn't share our shock at the sight of child miners. Back in Lubumbashi, we went to see Moses Katumbi, Katanga's newly elected governor. He's a very powerful mining tycoon himself. I wanted to find out what he thought about the Chinese in his province.
We're looking for everyone to come. Even the Chinese, we are going to keep the good Chinese. Even the European, we are going to keep the good European. Those companies which are not going to contribute for the poverty, they don't have a place in my province.
Child labour is a major issue. What are you going to do about that?
Any mine I found a child, I'll close it up.
I admired the governor for his promises, but I wondered how he was going to stamp out child labour in a place as poor as Katanga. We went west to Kolwezi, where we saw how hard the governor's task is. At this compound, yet again, we encountered the Chinese brokers. The governor says employing child labour in the mining industry is illegal and that he's going to close down companies that do it. This notice also says that children of less than 18 years old are not allowed in the company grounds, but as we've seen, children are going in and out all the time. I spoke to Harvey Lee, one of the Chinese managers. On your gate, you've got a sign saying children of less than 18 years are not allowed in the compound. But don't you acknowledge that the industry uses children and you're buying from them?
I checked, some of our suppliers they use children, maybe to wash the material or something. Yeah, definitely they do that. But for us, we never heard any teenage child here for our labor.
Even if they weren't working directly for his company, Mr. Lee's notice had no effect on the child miners.
Mwakangapi? Tres.
He's 13. Down by the river, I found hordes of kids, some of them toddlers, working to extract and clean copper and cobalt ore. The Chinese were hovering nearby, hungry for as much raw material as the children could bring them.
Mama.
Ya mbaya. Atakulipa bei mbaya paka vile unabebea paka vile utempeleka wapi.
This woman says that her sons are helping her to clean out the copper ore and that they have to do it because they need to put food on the table. The Chinese pay badly, but she says, what am I to do? Where am I to send it if I don't sell it to them? By doing business in Africa, China is bringing something to the continent that Western aid has failed to do over the last few decades. But some of the practices of Chinese companies here are in danger of reviving memories of the worst kind of colonial exploitation that a country like Congo is only just recovering from.
And that's our program for tonight. I'm Eric Campbell in the 12th century Cambodian temple of Preva here. Next week, a story of survival. A remarkable woman's journey home to help her country and heal her wounds.
Here, I am one of many, many orphans. So to be an orphan is the norm here.
Hi, I'm Jeff Sims on holiday in Zimbabwe.
Join me on a 4,000-kilometre grey safari. 4 riders, all of us old enough to know better, following the animals of the extraordinary Okavango Delta.
By golly, that's cold.
That's next Tuesday at 9:20. And if you'd like to leave comments about tonight's programme, our website is abc.net.au/foreign, where you can also watch some of our past stories on broadband. See you next week. Good night.